So I think the topic was something like what percentage of shifts in moral beliefs are progress versus something else? Are, people
discovery of moral truth, I think you wanted to have it.
Yeah. So, okay, here's my basic view. I think there are moral truths. I don't think these moral truths are determined by facts about our attitudes. The reason I think this is, so there are three ways for a moral claim to not be objectively true. It can be false, it can be neither true nor false, or it can be true in a way that depends on our attitudes. Because just to be objectively true is to be true in a way that doesn't depend on our attitudes. But then consider lots of moral claims. So consider a moral claim like it's wrong to torture people for fun. Doesn't seem false, doesn't seem neither true nor false. It doesn't seem like its truth depends on our attitudes. It doesn't seem like, the fact that we disapprove of torture is the thing that makes it wrong. So then we should think there are all these objective truths out there. And then we have moral beliefs. It looks like across history, our moral beliefs have gotten better. So we should think, a reasonable number of our beliefs are just, people converging on the truth, just like a reasonable number of our beliefs in other domains involve converging on the truth. A reasonable number of scientific beliefs are that way. So.
All right. So I notice that people have morals. They have moral beliefs. I think whether they believe those morals are social conventions or moral truth is less interesting to me. I'm more interested in the fact that they have these morals, and these morals vary in space and time, and I'd like to understand and explain that change. So the key question is, to what extent can we understand that change as something that looks like discovery of truth, whatever kind of truth it would be, versus other kinds of processes? So we might say, for example, morality is a way for communities to coordinate on people, promoting things in the community and not hurting each other. So social norms do that sort of thing, and social norms appropriately vary with context. They vary with not just the kind of society you're in and the kind of conflicts you have, but what particular history people have had with previous norms. So it makes sense that there's some process of adaptation whereby norms of a society, on average, move towards something that is adaptive for that society. And then if, in fact, there are robust ways in which societies need the norms to be similar, I might be willing to call that a moral truth. But what I see is large variation in space and time in these morals. And I see changes over times in morals that look not very much like a random walk that you expect when you're accumulating information. And so we have a lot of big moral trends that are not a random walk in time, and they're also not the sort of thing that if one society living next to another was just getting information from them, then they would be like aggregating information that way. So my specialty as a PhD student and then a later was formal models of information aggregation, why I was really into prediction markets. And models of information aggregation have a bunch of predictions about how beliefs should change with time, and it doesn't look to me like moral beliefs are changing like that very much.
Yeah, so I agree that our moral beliefs have varied considerably with space and time, just like I think our beliefs about scientific truths have varied considerably with space and time. Still, we would say that there's a good amount of progress in the scientific domain, that we have lots of beliefs about science that we believe because they're true, and that them being right explains our beliefs. Now, I don't think that the right way to think about morality is just whichever sets of social arrangements happen to be efficient for facilitating cooperation. Among other things, it doesn't seem like the fact that some social arrangement is efficient for facilitating cooperation tells you very much about whether it's the right moral arrangement. So, if it turned out that it was a very efficient way of facilitating social arrangements to, occasionally torture and kill people, there were sort of specific social arrangements where this was the most efficient way to organize society. I don't think that this would settle the question of whether it was all right to torture and kill people. I think it would remain wrong to torture and kill people. So then I think that, there are truths about morality, and these truths about morality are not made true by any facts about which sets of social arrangements are adaptive.
So in science, beliefs do tend more often to follow the random walk the theory predicts and follow that adjacent areas, come to correlate in their beliefs according to sharing information. There are many topics like that in engineering, tech, science, and other areas where we do in fact see this predicted phenomena you expect when what's happening is information aggregation of, again, following a random walk and then converging. But let's contrast that with a bunch of other areas, say clothing fashion, music fashion, art, convention, various kinds of social convention, like holding doors open for people, things like that. And I'm expecting that you think those other areas are not examples of learning the truth about whether we should hold doors open for people. You will see then more room for, different societies to just do things different based on their history and conditions. And now we're trying to distinguish, say in morality, which of these models is following more closely. Is it following the physicist's estimate of the mass of the electron pattern of following a random walk and then different places converge? Or is it more following, the conventions we see for music, clothing, fashion, various kinds of etiquette, those things? Which does moral look more like, one or the other?
Yeah, so I think it looks more like, less like beliefs about etiquette and more like beliefs about science. Now, I think there's been a lot less progress in the moral domain than in other domains like science, because science is empirically verifiable in a way that moral truths are not. It's a lot harder to make progress if you don't have the ability to carry out rigorous experiments. But
you can do experiments with etiquette. You can do experiments with songs. All these other things you actually can do experiments with.
Well, you can do experiments that tell you what people's judgments about them are. You can't do experiments which suffice to tell you which things are right in the domain. So there's no experimental test to see if abortion is morally permissible, for example.
Right, but I'm saying if we're thinking, is it like songs, we can do a lot of testing in songs. I'm not claiming there's a true best song. I'm claiming there are just songs that are more appropriate or popular in societies, and we're looking at morality and ask, does it behave more like that? So we're trying
so certainly you can do the same sorts of tests with respect to morality as you can do about either science or about things like etiquette, in that you can ask what people's judgments about them are. But my point was that you can't do any experiment that tells you the right answer in the moral domain, which is why we've made less progress.
So
now, sorry, go.
Well, so we do see a bunch of trends over the last few centuries. So I want to invite you to consider alternative explanations for these trends over the last few centuries other than discovering moral truth.
Well, so here are some of the trends in the last few centuries. There's been, a fairly few centuries ago, the widespread view is that slavery is great and we should have it around. Now the widespread view is no longer that. A few centuries ago, the widespread view was that mistreating animals is morally permissible. I mean, now in practice, we do mistreat billions of animals in horrible ways all the time. But at least when you show people videos of what's going on, at least most people think there's something going wrong with it. Well, throughout much of human history, people saw nothing wrong with animal cruelty. So you notice that there are lots of ways in which our moral beliefs have changed. And I claim the ways in which our moral beliefs have changed happen to correspond with the truth. So slavery really is wrong. Animal suffering really is a morally big deal. So then if you notice there have been a great deal of changes and they've converged on the truth, then you should think, well, maybe one of the reasons is that just as we've gotten better beliefs in lots of other domains, we've gotten better moral beliefs. We're reaching the truth.
But again, I want us to compare different theories and compare how well they predict the data.
So what is the other theory that you think?
That's what I want to walk you through. Other theories to explain these patterns. Okay.
Go ahead.
So first of all, just notice that whatever you believe is the moral truth, almost every society should see that in the recent past, opinion was converging to the truth because, however it was varied, they have beliefs about what they think right then, and in the past it was different, so it'll look like it's getting there, right? So that's not very predictive of it actually being truth. That's just consistent with any way in which people have opinions about morality and change over time, right?
So it's true that if moral beliefs change over time and people in a society think that whichever beliefs of their society has are correct.
Yes.
Then, of course, everyone will think, well, I don't think that, certainly. I think
but most people do.
Right, but so if you think we can have if we can have reason, we can think about moral issues and we can come to conclusions about them, like say that slavery is wrong,
Right.
This is something we know. Then we notice that there's a convergence between what our society has reached. So in other words, the fact is not that there's a convergence between what our society believes and what our society believes. The surprising fact is that there's a convergence between what we have independent good reason to think is correct and what our society believes. That there's been a fairly steady march in the direction of the truth.
So you're just really focused on seeing that you have a theory and that the data you can make fit your theory, but I want you to see other theories and compare how well other theories fit the data to how well your theory fits the data. So in the last few centuries, we've gotten rich, and many things have changed, understandably, in ways that rich people might be different. And then we also had ways in which the rich societies were high status and much of the rest of the world tried to copy them because we humans just have this general habit of trying to copy the successful. So that actually explains a lot of big changes over the last few centuries. We are more safety oriented today, more sensitive. In a lot of ways, it just makes more sense when you're rich. We're more worried about, things that could kill us. We're more anxious about destruction in various ways, which makes sense for people being rich. And then again, the world convergence makes sense if people have just been copying the norms and values and styles of the successful cultures because they wanted to be successful and affiliated with success. Now, another set of theories is that in the last few centuries, cultural evolution has weakened and we have drifted back towards sort of more natural human styles that we had previously gone away from because of strong selection pressure in the farming era. So foragers long ago were quite different than farmers over the last 10,000 years. And my story is that we're drifting back to forager styles, and that explains a number of consistent trends over the last few centuries: more democracy, less slavery, less war, less religion, less fertility, more leisure, more travel. Like a lot of these trends that you are pointing to are in fact consistent with the reversion to foraging styles, because foragers are in fact more like what you like in terms of morals. In addition, you can just have a decadence trends whereby over the last few centuries, as selection pressures have weakened, we have just become more myopic, lazy, selfish. There's a story that maybe that's natural for humans to be too, and we have drifted back in those directions. So these are some alternative explanations for understanding the major trends in values, norms, morality over the last few centuries. And so I want to offer these as a comparison to say, how well does these explain the changes versus the alternative theory that we have discovered moral truth consistently?
So I think once you grant that there are moral truths and that we have gotten into a better, and maybe you dispute that and then we could talk to that. But if you think there are moral truths and you think that as time has passed, we've gotten better at forming true beliefs across many different domains, then you should think that just the default theory, in light of there are truths in some domain and we've gotten better at discovering truths across domains, should be maybe at least a thing that explains a bunch of our differences in beliefs, is that we're discovering the truth, even if you can tell alternative stories about how it might be that that we would come to believe it. So you could tell a similar thing for nearly any class of beliefs. It's always possible to tell some just so story about how we might come to believe it, but the default should be if there's an a priori reason. If you think our beliefs are getting better, our ability to form true beliefs has gotten better with time in general, and that there are truths in some domain, just the default thing you should expect is that we're getting more truths in that domain.
Why don't you do this story for clothes or songs?
Because there aren't objective facts about which clothes are good.
I could claim there are objective facts about clothes and songs just as easily, and then I can say, look at the evidence. We have converged toward what we are now. We were different. We changed. Why isn't the evidence for that equally valid as the evidence you're offering for moral convergence?
So there are lots of things one could claim. The question is if there's good reason to think them. So
yes, I'm asking about the data, the correspondence between the data we see and the theory. I'm trying to point you to. You just keep going with the prior, saying I believe moral truth and therefore it's likely to be happening. I'm saying look at the data, not just your prior.
So the reason to think that there are moral truths does not have anything to do with whether there's been convergence on particular sets of moral beliefs over time. The reason to think that there are moral truths is that just if you think back to any set of foundational beliefs about in any domain, so think about why you think there's an external world, eventually, or why you think that you think that the theory that the world was made 5 minutes ago with false memories is a bad theory. You're ultimately going to bottom out in intuitions that people have about the world, where the way you should start in philosophy is you start with the way things seem and only give them up if there's a good reason to doubt them. Okay, and then we apply it, and so then we apply that methodology to the moral domain, and so we think. Does it seem like there are truths about morality? Well, it certainly seems like there are moral truths. It certainly seems like it's wrong to torture babies for fun. And then we say, okay, and does it seem like this is the sort of thing that depends on our attitudes? No, it doesn't seem like the fact that it's wrong to torture babies for fun depends on our attitudes. So, if we apply this intuitionist methodology, then we end up with there are objective moral truths. And then once we think there are objective moral truths, that explains what differentiates the clothes case from the moral case. Because
no, it doesn't. You haven't shown me why there can't be objective truths about clothes. All you said was why there's objective truths about morality. You never said anything about clothes at all. How are you concluding that there can't be objective truths about clothes? What's your argument there?
Well, so it does not seem. So in general,
it does not seem. That's your argument.
So in any domain, you start with the way that things seem, and then you only give them up if you're given a reason to doubt them. If we go,
it seems to me that there's objective truths about clothes. There we go. So,
well, does it
what
really?
do we do now?
Does it really seem to you? You think about it, and you're like, here's a point of comparison.
Yes.
So imagine
his clothes look better than his clothes. So there we go. I see that right there. It's right in my face.
But I don't think the intuition that people have is, there are sets of clothes that one person might prefer to another person. But the intuition that people have,
it's better.
But the intuition that people have in general is not that there are objective, independent facts about which clothes are better.
That's your intuition. My intuition, there are objective clothes.
I don't think that is really your intuition. But so just here's one case to differentiate these. So imagine we came across an alien species. Okay, and this alien species
wearing clothes, some of which look better than others.
And this alien species differed from us in two ways. One way is that they had an odd fashion sense, and the other way was that they tortured babies for fun all the time. I think we would think that one of these, while being different from us, is not an error, and the other one is an error. The baby torture one is the error.
It might be a bigger error, but why can't I think the badly dressed alien is making a mistake?
It's a thing you can think. It doesn't seem very plausible.
You're doing your priors here. I'm trying to do data comparison, look at the data of a history of changes in here, and ask which data fits better. And you keep wanting to go back to your prior that you just believe there's moral truth and there's not other truths, and that's just the end of your argument.
So I guess if you do think there's a comparable reason to think that, so suppose you do actually just have the intuition that there are objective facts about which clothes are good, and there are some aesthetic realists. They exist. So then maybe you should think, part of what explains why our aesthetic beliefs have changed is that we've gotten closer to the truth. Now, I'm not an aesthetic realist, or certainly not about clothing, and so I don't find the story plausible. But if you do think that
look at the
there's
data
a comparable
instead of your prior. Looking at the data of the history of changes in clothes, does that fit the theory that there was a truth about clothes and we were getting closer to it over time? Does that fit as well as you think the moral data fits your moral information?
Well, I don't think that this is the right way to go about it methodologically.
Prior, likelihood, we're doing Bayesian data, right? I'm asking about the likelihood.
If you're looking at whether we're converging on the truth in some domain, one of the things that you should do before ascertaining whether we're converging on the truth in the domain is see, are there truths in the domain?
No.
And that's not a thing.
No. You have a prior and a likelihood. You don't have to do one, agree on one before the other. You simultaneously estimate a prior and a likelihood. You fold them together to get a posterior. That's Bayes' rule. That's what we're trying to do here.
But one thing that will go into the prior is what your moral beliefs are. So if you think that there are facts about morality, then your credence that we're converging on the truth, if you have independent reason to think in general we're converging on truth across domains, then that should make your credence, like that makes the theory.
So say with UFOs, some people say, I don't care what data you have about UFOs. I'm just sure they couldn't possibly be there, so I'm not going to look at your data. That's where you have such a strong prior, you're not willing to look at the data. That sounds what you're doing here about morality. You're saying, I have such a strong prior, I don't need to look at your data. I don't need to look at how well the data corresponds to my theory or this other theory. I just have a strong prior.
So if it was true that there was some other theory that was a substantially better fit for the data, then you should reject
but
the theory
that's what we
on
have
which
to look at the data to see. Yes, that's what I'm suggesting we do.
But I'm happy to talk about the data, but my claim is just that the starting default view, once you think there are moral truths and in general our ability to ascertain truths across domains are improving, the starting default view that you should occupy most of your probability mass should be that we're converging on the truth. And then if there are strong reasons to give that up, if there are particular facts that are extremely poorly predicted on that hypothesis, then you should give that up. But I'm just saying that's the starting default.
My prior isn't remotely as strong as yours, so that's why we have to look at data. We're arguing over the prior just isn't going to get us.
So what is the data that you think my theory poorly explains? And just note for the theory, I agree that there are many of our beliefs I think are not converging on the truth. I think in many cases the thing that explains why we believe things about morality they're not explained by the fact that we're right.
So look at the pattern of the last few centuries across the world of changes in etiquette, songs, clothes, other social conventions. Look at the pattern over time of how it changes. Is it a random walk? Is it more of a smooth thing? How correlated is it across countries? Look at all of those patterns and compare it to the pattern of morality and ask, is the morality pattern substantially different than these other patterns that you don't think are truth patterns? And so you have to explain in other ways, but I say it looks a lot like the pattern for morality. So I don't think the data is favoring your theory. And I'd say if we look at science or other areas of engineering where we do see there is a truth, the pattern of change over time is actually quite different there. Like the pattern of estimates of the mass of the electron follows a random walk, as does most physical parameters. Truths at the world out there, they tend to follow random walks, and different parts of the world tend to share their same estimates when they communicate across the world. That's the pattern of things we have truths for. Then there's this whole other pattern of things like etiquette and clothes and songs. And I say the moral pattern looks a lot more like that second pattern than the first.
Why not just all this class? Why wouldn't it all act the same? And so why wouldn't you believe that it's all true? If one of it's true or has an objective truth, all of it should be.
So in the things in the class are like moral and then like aesthetic judgments.
Yeah.
And etiquette judgments.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the reason is just it's that if first moral anti-realism is extremely counterintuitive and goes against a wide number, extremely widely held commitments the first theory has, while aesthetic anti-realism is intuitive to
Priors.
I mean, you can call it. I mean, if it's fine to get your priors from your intuitions, I don't think you don't. I mean, I get it. They function pretty much like priors.
So we're out of time. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.